Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Our environment, the pandemic, personal relationships. These make up our reality. But what if we had the ability to rewire our thinking?
As individuals, we have different realities. Since we see things from our own viewpoint, our perception differs from person to person. For instance, what I believe is beautiful may be different from someone else's perception. This allows us to approach our realities uniquely in order to succeed.
However, reality as a whole is constantly changing, and as a result, we are presented with new obstacles every day. From less sleep, an overbearing Netflix addiction, to a pandemic. We have to adapt and rewire ourselves in order to overcome these pressing issues. And look how far we've come. What were once forests have now transformed into tall skyscrapers.
Reality Rewired encompasses our generation's ability to adapt and overcome obstacles that we face in our everyday life. Join us on September 3rd to rewire your reality.
Good afternoon, OFS, and welcome to our TEDxYouth OFS 2021 event, Reality Rewired. TEDx is a grassroots initiative created in the spirit of TED's mission to research and discover ideas worth spreading. It was brought to OFS in 2018 by 4 very passionate students, Karthike, Malhar, Kritika, and Atar. TEDx brings the spirit of TED to local communities around the globe via rules and tools. All social management measures are being followed. Everyone here is wearing a mask, their hands are sanitized, and social distancing is enforced. Our crew and speakers have worked really hard for this, so we hope you enjoy. Now, I have the honor of presenting our first speaker of the afternoon, Aditya Nair. As a long-standing member of the OFS theater community, Aditya has constantly dealt with change and is here to give us his advice on how to deal with it. So join me in welcoming him.
Hello, my name is Aditya Nair, and I happen to be one of the world's best... Nothing, really. I'm in my senior year of high school. I like the sciences, the performing arts, long walks on the beach. But really, I have nothing novel or revolutionary to tell you today. Then again, we do often tend to overlook the simple ideas and deem them common knowledge. You see, I know something about each and every one of you in the audience tonight. You have a problem, and I happen to have the solution. Okay, I'm just gonna say it. You are terrible at dealing with change. And now, I might be generalizing a little bit here, but for the most part, people just seem to believe that change is a negative aspect of life. But I've had many experiences that have conditioned me to approach change in the most efficient manner, to the point where I no longer see it as something I need to fix or get over. Now, mind you, I don't claim to be some sort of expert at dealing with change. I'm still on my learning curve, but I do think it's really important that as many people as possible can also start erasing the negativity surrounding it. And before I start, contrary to popular belief, Your ability to deal with change is not dependent on your age, or whether you're a Gemini, rising, Jupiter, retrograding, Scorpio, or whatever. And there's a lot of simple fixes that we can implement into our lives that will make change a more positive process. Without further ado, I present to you a high schooler's guide to dealing with change, a guide I believe everybody needs, especially Libras. Now, seeing as I'll be talking about it for the next 15 minutes or so, I probably should define the concept of change.
Yeah. After countless minutes of research, I couldn't find a single definition that perfectly encapsulated it. But hey, I'm not one to back down from a challenge, so I decided we could do the next best thing. Make one up. Now, this might be difficult for some of you, but I want everybody to imagine themselves as a human being. And for the sake of my definition, a 36-year-old who still lives in their parents' house. You've decided to, hibernate. And you have your little room with a desk that also works as your kitchen, that also works as your bed, that also works as your wardrobe, that also works as your bath. On second thought, you have a separate bathroom. And for the last 6 days, you haven't moved an inch because you found just the ideal position, and making the slightest movement would rid you of your comfort. But one day, disaster strikes. There's a loud banging sound coming. Someone's knocking on the door. Oh, hey, it's your mom. And she walks in with a little list in her hand and she starts reading. Friends stopped airing 17 years ago. Santa isn't real. The Tooth Fairy isn't real. Your fiance isn't real. That was just us writing you letters from downstairs. And you're getting kicked out. Tomorrow. Okay. This definitely warrants getting out of the ideal position. What just happened? You're sad and you're angry and you're frustrated and you're yelling at the wall because life is so unfair. And the next day, you're on your feet again and there's a bright glowing, the sun is in your eyes and there's other people around you and everything's changing and you hate it. But wait, is that really a bad thing? I mean, think about it. You no longer have to survive off chips and Gatorade, and hey, you can feel your knees again. What I'm trying to say is, change is not something that leaves a permanent adverse impact on your life. All it's trying to do is give you a little nudge so that you can experience things that you didn't know you wanted to experience, and explore aspects of your personality that you didn't even know that they exist. Change is just trying to spark the discovery of the relationship between your surroundings and your response to them. Now, even though I'm trying to convince you why change is such an amazing thing, I have to admit, change can be overwhelming because it's like that little 4-year-old who just feels like they're programmed to exploit your weaknesses and to punch you while you're down. And every time you build the courage to fight it, it strikes with greater force. See, today I realize that you can't beat change the same way you conquer a fear. You shouldn't have to face it because it's not scary. Yet famous quotes like, "Change is the only constant," or "change is inevitable," make it seem like some sort of villain. You see, in reality, change is less of an obstacle that you need to overcome and more of a journey of understanding its relationship with you and how it impacts you personally. Now, the hardest part about this journey is the fact that one form of change can incite other forms of change. And I call it the change reaction. And your change reaction begins when you first notice it. After all, the first step to dealing with change is understanding when you're faced with it. After you leave today, I want you to take a step back and look at your life. Look at what you consider normal and what you consider different. My old definition of normal used to be when there were no obstacles at all, and life was predictable and tolerable. Well, reality hits like a truck. Life is more like that. It's twisted and it's volatile and there's so many ups and downs that you can't control. And conventional methods of dealing with change try to force something that looks like that into a short, simple line like the one above, which is just impossible. Lucky for me, I didn't really have to face this issue because I got my change reaction started when I first got into theater. Now, acting was not something I was always passionate about. In fact, the first time I ever auditioned for something, it was just me and a few of my friends messing around. I could never have guessed the kind of impact it would have on me in the years to come. Let me take you back to my middle school days. I'm going to paint you a picture. I walk into the auditorium in my school, and I queue up to audition for
for a musical. Now we sang, we danced, and we acted, and I thought I absolutely aced my audition. I mean, I even remember strutting up to the bulletin board when the cast list was released and looking to see my name right at the top. Now, it's probably important I tell you what musical I auditioned for. It was Annie, a story following the adventures of the little children from an all-girls orphanage leading to their eventual escape from the authoritarian rule of Miss Hannigan, the head caretaker. Even today, I cannot explain what role I expected to land. I mean, maybe my performance was just so captivating that we're going to change the name of the musical to Andy and cast me as the main role. I don't know. Back to the bulletin board anyway. I didn't get a role up there. Or there. Okay, fine. I got a role at the very end of the list with like 20 other people called the NYC Chorus. I was still pretty excited though. I mean, I was going to have a stage time of like 2.5 minutes, give or take 2 minutes. And apart from the one song I was performing, I was also given the job of moving a brick wall onto stage with a sign that read Dog Pound, and I had to move it back off after. All in all, a pretty simple task, but how can anything go wrong? Well, then came opening night, and we couldn't find the sign. And my fellow NYC chorus members / backstage crew were panicking. We had the smallest parts in the show, yet somehow we were about to mess the whole production up. Until I had the genius idea, move it on anyway. I mean, it's not like the audience is going to sit back and think, I expected to see a dog pound sign on that brick wall. These middle school children are completely talentless and they're going nowhere in life. Even if they were thinking that, they weren't about to say it out loud. This made me realize how change facilitates self-discovery and how theater was the ideal medium for me to understand how change works in life. Theater is an environment where change is not only accepted, but it's welcomed. And if you place yourself in a character's shoes, or take it a step further and place a character in your shoes, you can learn a lot more about dealing with adversity. Now, to explore this in further detail, we need to look at the idea of being comfortable. Now, being comfortable can be dangerous because it prevents us from challenging ourselves and inviting change into our lives. What tends to happen when we're not comfortable is that we don't take risks anymore because as humans, we've evolved to prefer certainty and predictability. And after we've taken care of our basic physiological and psychological needs, we don't see the need to challenge ourselves. This is because of something known as distress. When you're in distress, you have the tendency to not focus on your mental, emotional, or physical experiences. And you start saying things like that. I give up. Now, be honest. How many of you have said that phrase before? I know you have. And you definitely have said I give up. And I'm pointing at empty chairs. Anyway, in distress, our brain tries to convince us that we aren't capable of overcoming the challenge at hand and that we should just give up. But we can reverse this effect in a process known as eustress, which gives us the confidence to approach challenges if we focus on the benefits we'll reap after we conquer the challenge. Now, sometimes seeking discomfort, breaking rules, and challenging tradition are the only ways to move things forward. Because if you want to grow as a person, you need to actively place yourself into unpredictable situations that are going to help you learn something about yourself. Take, for example, a TEDx talk. Now, if you've watched other TEDx events before, you'll know that the giant TEDx letters and the red circle are customary. The speaker stands right here on this red circle and delivers their talk, which makes it easier for the lighting and the video crew to get the best video quality possible. But hear me out. I want everybody in the audience to have the confidence to literally step outside the red circle. See, I would do this, but I already know the production team's going to be at my neck after this show, so I'm just going to take a little step back. What I meant to say was, have the confidence to metaphorically step outside the red circle. If you actively seek change, it'll stop acting like the annoying 4-year-old it usually is and start becoming a tool for self-discovery. And in a day and age where it's so easy to learn about other people and other things, self-discovery is that much more important. In my short time here on Earth, I've realized that life tends to follow a cycle, and every experience begins with some form of change or an opportunity. Say, for example, you've hypothetically been asked to hypothetically audition for a hypothetical play. This is completely hypothetical, by the way. And in an attempt to chase this opportunity, you prepare and you poise yourself, ready to show the world who you are. You go into the bathroom, you look into the mirror, and you tell yourself, I can do this! And then a little voice in your head says, you can't do this. And the one voice turns to many voices, and great, you're doubting yourself. The voices are going to tell you, oh, you're too short, young, and brown to play the 60-year-old Caucasian billionaire. And believe me, there's going to be times when you think there's nothing positive going on about the change you're facing. But it's in those times that it's crucial to realize that our mind is both our biggest obstacle and our biggest asset. In fact, we're smart enough to manipulate change to work for us. In theater, the cardinal sin is letting an audience know that you aren't prepared. Even if it's true, you just have to act like you know exactly what you're doing and fake confidence if you need to. Now, with this new wisdom in your mind, you build confidence again. And with your second wind, you rush into that audition ready to prove all the doubters wrong, and then you might fail. But this isn't really a true failure, because even though you didn't get the part, this experience helped you learn something about yourself. Maybe it is true. You are too short, young, and brown to play the 60-year-old billionaire, but there's no way you could have come to that conclusion without accepting the challenge to audition in the first place. Moral of the story, after every harsh wind, this isn't in the script. This is not planned. But you know what? I'm calm. I'm confident and I'm calm. And I see what life is trying to do here. They're trying to make me practice what I preach. Well, joke's on you, because I don't need a script. Let me start that again. Moral of the story, change is a good thing. Now let me move on to my conclusion. I hope I've done my part in encouraging you to actively invite change into your lives. As an individual, there's no way I can know what everybody's going through. But what I do know for sure is that if you look past the challenge at hand and try your best to focus on the benefits you'll reap if you succeed, change will become a much more positive experience. Now, as I said earlier in my speech, your change reaction begins as soon as you realize it. So I've done you all a favor by even bringing it up. I'm looking to get some service credit? No? Oh, okay. Anyway, now you have the perfect plan of action when you're faced with change. First, understand when you're faced with it. Know what's normal and what's different to you. Secondly, live with the change. See how it can benefit you and what you can learn from the lesson. And third, do your best to be optimistic in any negative situation. Wow, I might get slightly emotional here. I'm really fighting the urge to speak like a motivational speaker. But you know what? You adopt that growth mindset. You go out there, put your mind to it, and you can achieve anything you want, even your biggest dreams. And on that note, it gives me great pleasure to say unironically, for the first time in my life, thank you for listening to my TEDx talk, and have a good day.
Good job. Okay.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. Wow. Thank you for your speech, Aditya. It was fascinating to learn about the experiences and perspectives you've gained through theater. Now, do you ever find yourself sitting in class, distracted, drifting away, completely disengaged from your reality? If so, please join me in welcoming our next speaker for the day, Hetal Mahajan, who will be discussing the topic of escapism in teens.
So, this morning I woke up at 7, not 6. I brushed my teeth, I took a shower, I got ready for school. I ate some breakfast. The breakfast wasn't particularly special, but it definitely wasn't anything bad, you know? It's kind of like the morning commute, where the streets weren't completely filled with traffic, but they weren't completely empty either. Anyways, I got to school, I went to class, I sort of paid attention, and then I went down the stairs to the canteen, and then I started thinking about what I was gonna do when I got home. And before I go on any longer, how many sentences into that riveting story did you feel the need to think about or do anything else that was remotely more exciting? It's precisely that feeling, that impulse that I want to talk about today. And it happens far more often than you might realize. For example, you've gotten into a fight with your parents or had a falling out with a friend. You think, God, I cannot believe that they would say something like that to me. Your feelings are hurt, your ego is bruised, but you know that dealing with it means digging it all back up and adding further insult to injury. The situation in front of you doesn't look great. Instead, plugging into your favorite video game and getting completely lost for the next few hours sounds like a much better alternative. Now, if this example doesn't strike a chord, maybe the next one will. It's Saturday morning and the list of things that you need done by Monday is as long as it has ever been. The sheer stress and lingering workload is killing your weekend vibe. But, by a stroke of luck, you swear your favorite show was just added to Netflix. And that seems to take up your time for the next 2 days straight. Still no luck? Hopefully this last example will strike a chord with you. Exams are approaching. You know that there's a lot riding on these results. You don't want to let down your parents, your teachers expect more from you, and you want to meet your own goals and succeed. All of that pressure, and now suddenly the last thing that comes to mind is picking up a textbook and getting started. What comes to mind instead is immersing yourself in your favorite fantasy novel, or listening to music, or even just using your phone. Anything where your worries become distant and a new preferable reality replaces your own. Now, this might sound a lot like procrastination, but in reality, it's something a lot more complex than that. It's a psychological tendency known as escapism. Escapism is the tendency to seek distraction or relief from unpleasant realities by engaging in fantasy or seeking entertainment. In the most basic of explanations, when we're faced with negative emotions and their cause, be it stress, anger, anxiety, grief, even boredom, given the option, we will always choose relief. A temporary change to our reality where this burden is no longer at the forefront. The issue is, in many of in the modern day situations that a teenager may choose to indulge in escapism, begin to resemble procrastination a lot. Combined with the idea that delaying productivity is seen as a repellent and negative quality, the phenomenon of escapism is gaining a growing stigma. But this isn't the entire truth, and we can understand escapism in the way that we biologically process our emotions. Now, bear with me here, but this is the limbic system. It's a set of structures in our brain responsible for emotional processing and response. It contains the thalamus, the amygdala, the hippocampus, and the hypothalamus. The thalamus relays sensory signals to the amygdala, where they are then assigned a certain emotional significance based on previous memories. The hippocampus, where memories are stored, allows you to make a decision based on your previous memories of that emotion. Finally, the hypothalamus will regulate a release of hormones, resulting in the physical way that you might feel a certain emotion. What this roughly translates to is, say that exams are coming up. Your sensory organs, like your eyes and ears, allow you to take in that information, be it through listening to your teachers or reading announcements. That sensory information is relayed by the thalamus to the amygdala. The amygdala will then assign a negative emotional significance to it based on your previous experiences. Through this, your hippocampus is able to coordinate a response with the hypothalamus based on your previous experiences with exams. It recalls the stress, the anxiety, maybe even the disappointment, and it coordinates a response, a release of adrenaline and cortisol, which are stress hormones. Your heart starts to race, your palms get clammy, your mouth gets dry, and the entire notion begins to repel you, and you want to do anything to get rid of it. So what do you do instead? Our nature dictates that we choose to get rid of this unpleasant situation and replace it with a more preferable alternative. Attain a momentary reprieve from the burden that is in front of you. Now, remember the limbic system? Within it is something known as the brain reward pathway. It's a specific circuit in your brain that communicates using dopamine, which is a feel-good molecule. So when a specific action or experience triggers this pathway, it releases a rush of dopamine, causing feelings of pleasure and fulfillment and enjoyment and happiness. So not only does dopamine have this gratifying effect, but it also strengthens that pathway. That means that it's going to enhance memories of this reward and tell your brain, hey, remember that action or experience because it made you feel good. Now, you might be wondering what exactly this means in terms of escapism. So let's take a common escapist activity for a teenager, using social media. You open your phone for 5 minutes, and next thing you know, 3 hours have passed you by. Each time you look at a new post or video on your feed, your brain anticipates a positive outcome based on previous experiences. A funny picture, a cute video, a constant stream of entertainment. And each time, it triggers this pathway and results in the release of dopamine, making you feel good and reinforcing that same behavior. Now, the same goes for any other escapist activity, be it reading a book or listening to music or even taking a nap. The reliable anticipation of a positive and entertaining outcome makes it a much more preferable reality than the one that you might be in. So, the next time you choose to remove yourself from the punishing and off-putting situation in front of you, know that it may not be you being lazy or apathetic, but part of a mechanism built into your biology and psychology. But before you start using this as an excuse for why you didn't finish that assessment or why you haven't gotten up all day, it's not that simple. Unlike the generations before us, we consume media like never before. With the dawn of virtual realities and online worlds, it has never been easier to immerse yourself and lose yourself in an alternate reality. But what does this mean for us? Will we become a generation of escapists, ill-equipped to face all of the challenges that lie in front of us? In a survey I conducted of a group of teenagers, 72.7% said that they believed they experienced some form of escapism almost on a daily basis. Some of the most common activities were things that you might be guilty of: excessive use of social media, binge watching shows, or just excessively napping. But the most important thing to note here is the impact that they felt that it had on their lifestyle. Things such as, I feel like escapism sets up almost a distaste for real life because what you're escaping to almost always seems to be greater than reality. Or, it provides me with instantaneous relief, but in the long run, it isn't healthy because it makes me less productive. This is exactly the distinction that we need to learn to make. Escapism is an incredibly important coping tool. The temporary distraction from a stressful situation that it provides us with can give us the distance and mental relaxation that we need to better understand and respond to the challenge that's in front of us. In times of extreme psychological duress, such as after a traumatic event or grieving the loss of a loved one, escapism in the form of engaging with storytelling or picking up a new hobby can provide people with the hope and insight that they need to keep going. And the pain and the power of distraction is not to be underestimated, with it even being able to alleviate the physical sensation of pain. So, as a coping strategy as well as a mood and stress management tool, escapism will remain a necessary and unavoidable habit that we all have. The problem arises when we are no longer able to make this distinction between a healthy coping mechanism and a time-consuming mental block that distances us from our loved ones, responsibilities, and our own personal growth. In gaming and internet addictions, primarily which affect teenagers, one of the most common tendencies of those affected is escapism. And while escapism might not always be a precursor to something as severe as addiction, it is part of something that we are all guilty of on a daily basis: procrastination. But by learning how to recognize times of your own unnecessary or excessive escapist activities, we find the key to staying anchored to our own realities, keeping us from becoming distant from each other, keeping us connected to each other, as well as keeping us moving forward. But the question remains, in a generation where time travel, superheroes, and traveling to the edge of the galaxy are available at the touch of your fingertips, Will we become the generation that learns from this creativity and leisure and advances? Or will we become the generation that gets lost in the illusion forever? Thank you.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that amazing speech, Hetal. I really enjoyed it, and I'm sure that all of us can relate with our own escapist tendencies. Now, I'm sure that all of you must have heard of Godzilla and Jaws. But did you know that these movies are a reflection of the changing social and political environments? Beyond the gargantuan reptiles and man-eating sharks, these movies are a powerful tool to actually tell us about how society reacts to fears about change. So, without any further ado, let's put our hands together for Kitanovimuri.
Passeris Park, a place you and I know well. By day, by the shade of the trees surrounding the park, people frolic, people play, unsuspecting, unaware. By night, that's when she comes out to begin her hunt. There's the soft fragrance of friendship in the air, and light feminine laughter in the distance. A baby cries. A dog howls. The noises get quieter, softer, and then you spot her. Under the full moon, she's a vision of white, long hair, pale skin, and dark nails. The sweet whiff of flowers suddenly smells a lot like the stench of rotten flesh. That's when she grabs you. Nails sink into your skin. The last thing you will ever know. Got scared? That was the legend of the Pontianak, the supposed ghost of a pregnant woman who died during childbirth. She is said to roam Passeris Park pretty frequently. Throughout the years, ghost stories and urban legends have been told to terrify children, frighten the weak of heart, and amuse those looking for a good scare. But why do we like being scared? Doesn't it seem a little counterintuitive? After all, it's not nice to be in a constant state of anxiety all the time. Trust me, I know. There are a number of theories on why we like being scared. The most generally accepted one is that we like fear because it fills us with adrenaline, which makes us feel good. There's a theory by scholar Noel Carroll which essentially boils down to humans are highly counterproductive creatures who will do anything to satisfy their curiosity, even if it means taking part in things that are bad for them. The Greek philosopher Aristotle hypothesized that it could be a form of catharsis, where we purge or release our negative emotions and feelings about the world. This theory is further supported by the dispositional alignment theory, which states that we like watching horror and horror films because in the end, we want the bad guys to be killed. The one most relevant for today is one I like to call change is scary. A theory by cultural historian DJ Scal, it essentially states that horror movies are a reflection of our society's fears about changing realities, making them relatable to us. According to Scal, if a filmmaker follows the structure of the dispositional alignment theory, while making the plot of the film relatable to current times, it makes the film infinitely satisfying for the audience, as during the climax, the resolution, we are literally watching our current fears get resolved in front of our very eyes. In that way, horror movies offer a really nuanced and often hopeful perspective for the audience. To further investigate this, why don't we take a trip back in time? Over 60 years ago, to be precise. The 1954 film Godzilla is, in short, about Japanese authorities reacting to a nuclear monster. While later versions of Godzilla are a bit more like action movies, the original Godzilla was undoubtedly a horror movie that followed Scal's theory. In fact, when it was first released, it was deemed too relatable. People took offense at the perceived commercialization of the devastation Japan had undergone due to World War II, particularly because the Daigyo Fukurumaru incident, where a Japanese tuna fishing boat was found to be contaminated by nuclear fallout from Bikini Atoll, had happened just 8 months prior. There are many points in the film that relate to the viewers of the time. The most obvious one is the nuclear monster Godzilla. Godzilla itself is an example of fears differing between nations. What's popular in horror typically differs from country to country because, well, experiences are different. However, within countries themselves, there are certain experiences that could be considered universal. In the case of Godzilla, while in America, radiation creates superheroes like Spider-Man, in Japan, it's monsters it creates. This is because both countries have different narratives relating to nuclear fallout. Another fear that Godzilla tackles is the fear of the old being replaced by the new. After World War II, when the emperor renounced his divine power and Japan came under American occupation, many people were dissatisfied with the stark movement of Japan's political and societal landscape. After the dual voice broadcast in which the emperor announced their decision to surrender, a crowd gathered out in front of the imperial palace in Tokyo and cried. In the words of author John Dower, their tears reflected a multitude of sentiments: anguish, regret, anger, bereavement, anger at having been deceived, sudden emptiness, and a loss of purpose. As they say, life imitates art, and art imitates life. This loss of purpose can be seen no better than in Japan's media landscape in the coming years. Many movies became focused on the past, like Rashomon, Ugetsu, and Gates of Hell, highly introspective, like Ikiru and Record of a Living Being, or just plain depressing, like The Bad Sleep Well and Tokyo Story. In particular, the return to the shogunate era felt a dissatisfaction in many for the industrialization Japan had previously undergone, as many found that to be the source of their problems. Godzilla best exemplifies this fear through the contrast in the scientist characters in the film between Kyohei Yamane and Daisuke Serizawa. Yamane is a scientist through and through. His primary aim to study Godzilla, despite it being a destroying monster. In contrast, Serizawa is a bit more restrained, a bit more aware of the consequences of his actions. He's reluctant throughout the film to even use his innovation, the oxygen destroyer, to kill Godzilla, fearing that it could be the catalyst for an arms race between powerful nations. After World War II, when the emperor announced his decision to surrender, many Japanese army and navy officers committed suicide, unwilling to live under the dishonorable mark of surrender. In a way, Serizawa could be read as an allegory to them. So determined he is to stick to his ideals and not let his weapon fall into the wrong hands, he ends up destroying his notes and killing himself. Now, Serizawa's death and Godzilla's ending may give you the idea that innovation, bad. After all, yeah, sure, the oxygen destroyer kills Godzilla, but its inventor is dead by the film's ending, and Godzilla itself is the byproduct of innovation. This would have been a highly appropriate message in an era where innovation brought about numerous casualties. However, through the character arc of the ever-curious Yamane, the film suggests that innovation may not be so bad if we are aware of its price. Yamane starts out the film hardcore dedicated to science, pushing for progress no matter the casualties it brings. he ends the film a little more worldly and a little more humbled, respecting Serizawa's sacrifice, but never truly giving up his curious edge, as can be seen from the subsequent Godzilla movies he appeared in. With this, the film suggests that innovation may not be so bad if we are aware of its price. Moving on from Godzilla, many of you might have heard of the classic 1975 hit, Jaws. I know what some of you might be thinking. Jaws is a thriller, isn't it? Yeah, well, the thriller and horror genres are kind of overlapping. I mean, they both use tension, but horror uses it to get to a point of climax where the hidden evil is revealed, whereas thriller uses it to maintain a spooky and sometimes mysterious atmosphere. In the case of Jaws, there's no hidden evil. There's a shark, it's killing people, that's it, that's the movie, pack it up and go home. However, it does use some elements of horror, such as gore, and its atmosphere is more mysterious, is more terrifying as opposed to mysterious. It also follows Scal's theory to a T, depicting the struggles that those in its country of 1970s America would have faced during this time. A little about the background of Jaws. Jaws is based on a novel by American author Peter Benchley, written just a year before the release of the movie. And while now it's known as the American summer blockbuster, at the time of its release, it was actually known as the Watergate movie. On June 2nd, 1972, 5 men working to re-elect President Richard Nixon broke into the Democratic Party's headquarters at Watergate. They got caught, and in the subsequent trial that followed, one of the men wrote a letter to the judge, alleging that not only did White House and Republican officials know about the break-in, but they had paid the defendants to keep quiet. Eventually, all sorts of damaging evidence began to emerge, linking Nixon and the White House at large to the crime. Soon, the articles of impeachment against Nixon were adopted, and he resigned from office. The Watergate scandal rocked the nation at a period where they were already reeling from the Vietnam War. In 1973, just a year before he was impeached, Nixon signed the Paris Peace Accords, marking the end of American involvement in the Vietnam War. This was the first war that America had lost, and the first that really came into people's living rooms nightly, and such inspired widespread protests and movements. It led to over 60,000 American lives lost, and over 2 million Vietnamese ones. To top all of that off, there was also economic problems during this time, with the 1970s seeing some of the highest rates of inflation in recent US history. To put this concisely, not a good time to be American. How does this manifest in the film? Well, you might remember something about that gigantic man-eating shark the film is named after. I imagine it's pretty hard to forget. However, the shark isn't really the only villain in the film. We definitely can't discount the actions of Mayor Larry Vaughn, who seemingly donates his brain to charity for the course of the movie, if you ask me. The parallels between Nixon and Vaughn are many and direct. In the same way that Nixon tried to pressure those at the Watergate trial to lie, Vaughn pressures the coroner to lie about the death, saying it's a boating accident as opposed to a shark death. Now, the film also differs from the novel in one key way, introducing a new subplot. Out on the sea, Quint, part of the shark hunting trio, tells the other 2 members of the shark hunting trio that of the true story of the USS Indianapolis, a real ship in World War II that delivered the atomic bomb that was going to be dropped on Japan. On its voyage back, the crew of the ship suffered a similarly cosmic trial. Out on the sea, the boat was hit by a torpedo, and its crew were forced to abandon ship. Hundreds of men died.
in shark-infested waters. At a period where the US was reeling from the effects of a war they had lost, the somber remembrance of the price that war brings, even for the victors, struck a chord in audiences. Looking at the shark hunting trio themselves, each of them is representative of a faction of their time. There's Quint, the physical symbol of the price of war. Hooper, the quintessential wealthy US college boy, easily imaginable as part of the Vietnam War protests. Then there's Brody, a family man who's undoubtedly American, but also a man who values justice. Out of the three, Quint could be said to be most representative of the past, the bloody wars, the casualties gained in them, and the guilt of those left behind. His sacrifice in the end not only vindicates him of the nuclear guilt he feels, but also posits the idea that war is not a solution. A man like Quint, who knows nothing but to fight, cannot survive in the future because the future should be one free of that. In the end, his sacrifice saves Hooper and Brody, who both represent the future. Interestingly, Hooper also dies in the novel, but in the film he stays alive. In the 1970s, many had a distrustful view of politicians, but in the end, we do need them to litigate and counsel for us. In a similar manner, many people in the town are rightfully afraid of the man-eating shark. However, Hooper embraces it with a sense of curiosity and purpose. In a way, this may suggest to audiences to not shy away from what they fear. The whole point of horror movies is to incite fear, to make us scared. Looking at both these films throughout the years, it's easy to see why they would have terrified audiences of their time. After all, they didn't just reflect physical fears, but more abstract, existential ones. However, at the end of the day, they all suggest messages of progress and hope. They say it is only natural to fear change, to be afraid of it. However, it is the only way to move forward, to change your reality for the better. Before I turn out the lights, I hope to leave you with one thing. By analyzing these films and knowing what makes them so scary to us, we can not only identify what we are afraid of, but how we can overcome that fear and move forward into a better day. Lights out. That's a stare.
Thank you, Keertana, for that amazing speech. It was so amazing to find out so much more about how horror movies are connected to the concept of change. And now finally welcoming our last speaker of the day, Jerome Boyd-Kirkup, who is the co-founder and chief scientific officer for Hummingbird Biosciences. Mr. Boyd-Kirkup will be exploring the innovative idea of the correct application of AI-powered technologies, which will allow us to understand more about the complex diseases and design new drugs to treat them. So please, put your hands together for our last speaker of the day, Mr. Jerome Boyd-Kirkup.
Good evening, and thank you for having me here today to speak with you. I just wish it could be there in person. My name is Jerome Boyd-Kirkup, and I'm the co-founder and chief scientific officer of Hummingbird Bioscience. And today, I wanted to talk to you about rewiring reality through innovation. Let's start at the beginning of my story. In 2013, my friend and co-founder Piers Ingram and I had a big idea. An idea that we thought may just change the world. And our idea was that the application of all of these computational technologies that were being developed in a variety of different fields, if they were applied in the right way to understand complex human diseases, we could use them to design new drugs to precisely treat those diseases. But it's important to know that an idea in and of itself is not an innovation. An innovation is an idea that has been transformed into a practical reality. And here you'll see Thomas Edison one of the most famous inventors and innovators who repeatedly turned ideas into innovations. And today, I'd like to take you on that journey of an idea to an innovation. All ideas start with insight. Insight arises from our observations of the world around us. Right now, we're at a time of unprecedented exposure to data. Data is all around us. Sometimes it can even feel overwhelming and that we're drowning in data. But I'd encourage everybody to look at that data, ask questions of the data, because with that, you can have insight and then you can seed new ideas. Our particular insight came from our careers working in applying some of these new technologies to better understand human disease in the field of biotechnology, and also about building different teams of different scientific disciplines to go about looking at problems from different directions. This was a field that was becoming known as systems biology. Now, we saw the power in these systems biology approaches, but we also saw that these approaches weren't being used in drug discovery and development, or if they weren't really being used in the right way. Drug discovery and development still really relied on trial and error, a traditional approach that unfortunately failed big, failed expensive time and time again. So, with insight comes ideas, but ideas can sometimes seem like the easy part. I'm sure you've all had ideas. Doing something about those ideas can be hard. Which ideas do we pick to work on? There's not enough time to work on all our ideas. How do we know if it's a good idea? And so I'd encourage you, first of all, not to rule out any ideas, not to say, hey, I'm not an expert in this field. I haven't been working at it for 50 years. My idea isn't that important. Ideas can come from the most unlikely places or unlikely people. And somebody who's been working in that field for 20 years may actually not be able to see the wood from the trees, whereas somebody who comes into that field with a different perspective may have a brilliant idea on day one. However, having an idea is just the first step. You have to develop that idea, test that idea out, figure out if it's really an idea you want to take forward. For us, we talked about it. We talked about it with our friends, we talked about it with our colleagues, we talked about it with experts that we could find in the field. We then thought about ways we could test that idea to see if it was good and how much that would cost. But remember, at some point, you have to turn that idea into something, and that requires action. Turning an idea into an innovation can seem like a mammoth task, but it's worthwhile. Development of our innovation has taken us a long time, and it's still ongoing. We've built a whole team of people around pursuing this innovation. We initially started testing our ideas, just Piers and I, just with a few outsourced experiments in China, just to test some of those initial ideas to see if they worked. And they did. And with that, we started a company. And we took those ideas further. And we built the team. But it still took 2 more years to really have the platform ready and those technologies ready. And it took 2 more years for us to start developing some new drugs. So in the next few slides, I just want to briefly explain to you our innovation in a bit more detail and how we're applying it to build drugs that may transform the lives of people with hard-to-treat diseases such as cancer. Now, the best way that I can describe our technology is it's an application of computational methodologies that allow us to understand disease-associated proteins, and through that understanding, predict how we can counteract that action to treat the disease. So the story here is this protein called HER3, which is known to be a key driver for many tumors. Now, our computational modeling showed that when the pink protein came in contact with the blue protein, we had a signal that went to the tumor cell, and that told the cancer to grow. And our methodology went one step further. It said, well, the best way to counteract that would be to design a drug that bound on that important interface between the 2 proteins and prevent them from pairing. Therefore, no signal, and the tumor stops growing. It also explained to us why previous efforts to drug HER3 had failed. You can see here in blue the sites of binding of all of the previous drug candidates against HER3, and as you can see, they're on the wrong side of the protein from where our predictions said they should be. So we had to use a different aspect of our technology that allowed us to design a precise antibody drug that bound to that important interface and that would stop that protein from binding to its other proteins and stop those signals. And when we tested that drug, which we call Hummingbird 001, we could see that it could completely stop the growth of the tumor in our laboratories. You can see that with the red line, which is the treated tumors, versus the black line, which is the untreated tumors which grow out of control. Now, I'm excited to say that Hummingbird 001 will be entering clinical trials this month in patients with some really tough cancers. And so I'm really excited to see the benefit that we can give to those patients. So, how did we deliver this innovation? And how can we continue to encourage innovation in other sectors? It's a common question that's asked by people, companies, even countries. How do we encourage more innovation? And with the perspective of delivering our own innovation, I would say that there are 3 things that are required to deliver on innovation, and I call them the 3 C's: courage, capabilities, and capital. So let's start with courage. When I say courage, I mean the courage to commit to an idea. Now, for most of you, completing a degree is absolutely the right choice, and that gives you options for the future. But at some point, you're going to want to weigh the risks and decide whether it's the right time to pursue your idea. When you do commit, do it 100%. Otherwise, other things in your life will distract you or get in your way. And remember, the pursuit of this innovation is not going to be smooth. It's okay to fail sometimes as long as you learn from those failures and keep pushing forward. At Hummingbird, we've developed a culture of hardworking, curious individuals who are not afraid to take risks and not afraid to fail sometimes. If things fail, we encourage people to be transparent, to discuss the problem, and to solve the problem together, because we succeed and fail together as a team. So don't get defeated by these few setbacks. Drug discovery is especially prone to failures and setbacks, and many other areas are as well. But doing new things is never going to be an easy or smooth process. Have the courage to keep solving the problems, keep making decisions that push you forward. Now, the second C is capabilities. And the first important capability is people. One of those people is yourself. You need to make sure you're as educated as you can be in the area that you're trying to innovate in. But it's important to also know that delivering an innovation is never going to be a solo effort. You're going to need a team around you. You're going to need to be honest about your strengths and weaknesses, and then find people who have the strengths where you're weak. Bring them into the team and create a really strong team together. For example, if you're not an expert in computers, find one, bring them into the team. If you're not an expert in cancer biology, find one, bring them into the team. If you're not an expert in budgets and accounting, find one, bring them into the team. That's how you build a great team. The second part that's going to be required to deliver on your innovation is technology. You know, we all use the technology around us, and that gets us where we need to go. You need to identify that technology, but you also have to have a bit of that courage to say, if that technology doesn't exist, create it yourself, figure it out, solve the problem. Thirdly, you need a space to work. You need a country or a city, you need a community, you need an ecosystem that will support you as you deliver that innovation. For example, we needed to find laboratories to perform experiments in. Luckily, we found our first home in Singapore and some great laboratories. That's why we founded the company. But since then, as the innovation has developed, as the company has grown, we've needed to find other people, other technologies, other places that have what we need to succeed. That's why we are now based in both the Singapore and the US and have built a team of over 80 people across both of those countries. The final C is capital, money. Money is necessary to pursue innovation. I mean, our first tests with those little labs in China were actually paid for with our own credit cards. I mean, we're not rich or having millions of dollars in our bank account to fund all of the work that we've done. But we believed in ourselves enough to set a budget and try something. This allowed us to get that first data that supported the founding of the company and allowed us to raise money from friends and family. That allowed us to build the company, get more data. We then went through a series of fundraising rounds, a Series A, where we raised $8 million in 2016. The Series B, where we raised $25 million in 2019. This is where we could really grow our operations in Singapore and the US, build our team. And now, in 2021, we just closed our $125 million Series C round. This now gives us the money that we need to do those very expensive clinical trials in human patients, really start to test out some of those drugs that we've created. Now, remember that when you're raising money, not all money costs the same. When you don't have any money, you're kind of at the mercy of the investors who will take advantage of you. Don't sell the farm. You need to be clever about not selling too much of your business too early on, because you're going to need more money down the line. Raise a little bit of money now, set a good budget, and make sure that you deliver with that money on the data that will be required or the results that you need to allow you to raise that next amount of money. Also, not all money is worth the same. Find investors who will bring added value. An investor who can, give you advice on your innovation, or has a network of other investors that they know and can help you to raise more money. Having a trustworthy investor bet on you actually helps you down the line to raise more money. It's something that we've learned from those very first days when we had to knock on 100 doors to convince somebody to invest. And today, people are actually coming to us, asking us to invest in the company. So, what's next? We've delivered this innovation, we've created a couple of new drugs, but it doesn't stop there. We now have a team of fantastic individuals who work better as an innovative drug discovery and development team, and they continue to innovate. We're innovating in other disease areas beyond cancer, such as autoimmunity. And together we have a vision of delivering the best drug to the right patient. So, I want to leave you with a final thought, and that is that the path to rewiring reality through innovation requires insight and ideas, but more importantly, requires a lot of hard work from a great team with courage, capabilities, and capital. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jerome. It was truly inspiring to hear how the pursuit of innovation can rewire our reality. A huge round of applause to all the speakers today, please. You've all done amazing, and we've had some fantastic speeches. But besides that, we owe a huge thank you to Ms. Beebe, Ms. Benson, and Ms. McConville for their constant support of this event. And of course also to Mr. Ho, Mr. Hendry, Mr. Eric, and Ms. Chun Yin for helping us set up this live stream. And to our fabulous carpenters for building us this amazing set. And of course, a very special thank you to Dr. Dench, Ms. Maris, and Ms. Ballantyne, as well as all the other teachers who've helped us put this event together. And a very, very special shout out to the art competition judges, Ms. Steven, Ms. Vidanovic, Ms. Go, and Mr. Marcos. You guys are awesome. And now, a very special thank you to all of the speakers. Aditya Nair, Hetal Mahajan, Kitanovimuri, and of course, Mr. Jerome Boyd-Kirkup. And we absolutely could not have done this without the rest of the beautiful leadership team. Head of Productions, Annie. Head of Communications, Irvi. Executive Director, Mehak. And Head of Events, Aishwarya. And I'm your speaker curator, Rebecca. And last but absolutely not least, a massive thank you to our lead organizer, Ms. Sullivan.
All right, what did you guys think of the show? So this team here, they've been working for almost a year to put this together, and I think at this point we've gone from like point A to B to C, then like back to A, and then jump to F, and I think we're in like the Greek alphabet of planning now. But this would not have happened without this amazing team. They've been resilient, they've been creative, and the thing that makes TEDxYouth at OFS so amazing is it's exactly what it sounds like. Youth at OFS. It's the kids. It's this team of high school students who's put on this whole event. Everything you saw here happened with these 5 leaders, the assistant leaders, their crews, and of course our amazing speakers. So we need to give a huge shout out to them one more time. Woo! These guys are the idea makers, the innovators, the problem solvers. Like, I'm so impressed with each and every one of them. And we also need to say a big thank you to all of you, our audience. And we so appreciate everyone for tuning in and watching today. And we really hope that you took something away from these speeches. And I want you to remember, TEDx isn't only about ideas and inspiration, but it's also about action. So, what are you going to do to rewire reality? Thank you.